Dr. Gray stood motionless by the window of their observation post, watching the busy street below. The morning rush hour in New York City provided the perfect opportunity to study human behavior. After 3 Earth years of watching humans, something about them still made the alien anthropologists' inner membranes quiver with unease. The notes on their digital pad were filled with ordinary observations: humans walking to work, drinking their morning coffee, talking on phones. But between these simple notes lay a pattern that Gray couldn't quite explain, something that made their 3 hearts beat faster whenever they thought about it. A small accident caught their attention. A human child had almost dropped their ice cream cone. Almost. The mother had reached out and caught it before it fell. But that wasn't what interested Gray. What fascinated them was how the mother had moved her hand before the ice cream began to fall. Gray rewound the recording from their optical implant. Yes, there it was again. The mother had started moving her hand a fraction of a second before the cone tilted. She hadn't just reacted. She had anticipated the exact way the ice cream would fall. "Computer, add to research notes," Gray whispered. Observation 2847. Humans display unprecedented ability to process future events. Subject 12,392 demonstrated preemptive movement based on an event that had not yet occurred. The computer beeped in acknowledgement as Gray continued watching. A businessman walked past their window, suddenly stopping at the crosswalk. 3 seconds later, a bicycle messenger zoomed past. The businessman hadn't seen or heard the cyclist. He had just known. Gray's tentacles curled in frustration. This was the 47th such incident they had recorded today alone. Their superiors back home had dismissed these observations as lucky coincidences or basic pattern recognition. But Gray knew better. They had studied 12 other spacefaring species, and none showed this ability with such frightening consistency. A knock at the door interrupted their thoughts. "Come in," Gray called out, quickly activating their human holographic disguise. Tom, the building's maintenance worker, stepped inside. "Just checking the heating system, Doc," he said with a smile. "Getting cold these days." Gray nodded, trying to maintain casual conversation as they had learned. Yes, winter is coming. They watched as Tom worked on the heating unit, but their attention was drawn to how the man's hands moved. Each tool was grabbed before he actually looked at it. Each motion flowed into the next as if he had practiced this exact sequence 1,000 times, but Gray knew this was the first time Tom had been in this room. "All done," Tom announced. "By the way, Doc, you might want to move your plant away from the heating vent. It'll dry out when the heat kicks in." Gray looked at their earth plant, a gift from the embassy. It was perfectly healthy now, but Tom had just described a future problem as if it had already happened. After Tom left, Gray rushed to their computer. "Computer, research update. Humans appear to be running constant simulations of future events in their minds. Not just simple predictions, they're processing countless possible outcomes simultaneously. They see what hasn't happened yet and learn from futures that don't exist." Gray's hands shook as they typed more notes. Other species could predict and plan, yes, but humans did something different. They didn't just guess what might happen. They lived through every possibility in their minds, experienced it, learned from it, all in the blink of an eye. The implications were staggering. In battle, in diplomacy, in any situation where quick decisions mattered, humans would always have the advantage. They weren't just choosing the best option. They were experiencing all options at once and learning from each one. Gray looked out the window again, seeing the humans in a new light. They all moved with this impossible awareness, this constant processing of infinite possibilities. No wonder the galaxy's greatest military minds feared them. No wonder the most advanced alien civilizations treated humans with careful respect. "Computer," Gray whispered, "mark this file as classified. Authorization level maximum." They would need more proof before submitting an official report, but one thing was becoming clear. Humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their adaptability. It was something far more terrifying, something no one in the galaxy dared to discuss openly. Dr. Gray's research led them to the local park the next morning. They had chosen a simple wooden bench, one that gave them a clear view of the playground and walking paths. Their digital pad was ready to record more observations of this strange human ability. A group of children played soccer nearby. Gray watched as a small boy kicked the ball, and every other child moved before the ball reached its destination. Not toward where the ball was, but toward where it would be. Each child's movements showed they had already lived through the next 10 seconds in their minds. Computer, mark timestamp. Gray whispered. Subject group demonstrates simultaneous future mapping. Note, children appear to develop this ability at an early age. A jogger passed by, smoothly avoiding a wet patch on the path that she couldn't possibly have seen from her angle. 3 seconds later, a dog shook itself dry, creating that very wet spot. Gray's outer membrane rippled with excitement. This wasn't just anticipation. The jogger had processed a future that hadn't happened yet. Their attention was drawn to 2 men playing chess at a nearby table. The older player moved his hand toward a knight, then stopped. He hadn't touched the piece, but his opponent had already smiled. Gray zoomed in with their optical enhancers. The younger player's pulse and muscle tension showed he had already experienced his victory. A victory that would have happened if the knight had moved. The older player chose a different piece instead, and the younger player's smile faded. They had both lived through an entire future that now would never exist. Computer, new category. Gray dictated. Humans demonstrate ability to process and learn from discarded timelines. They experience futures that never happen, then adjust their actions based on those non-existent experiences. A street musician caught Gray's attention next. The man played guitar while dodging coins tossed by passersby. Each dodge came before the coins were thrown. The musician's movements weren't reactions. They were pre-actions based on futures he had already experienced in his mind. Gray's research was interrupted by an incoming call from their superior, Director White. The holographic display showed the familiar sight of their boss's tentacled form. Report your findings, Observer Gray, Director White demanded. Gray hesitated. How could they explain what they were seeing? Sir, I've identified a pattern in human cognitive processes. They seem to be running constant simulations off. Stick to observable facts. Gray, Director White interrupted. We don't need your theories about human consciousness. But sir, look at this footage. Gray transmitted the recording of the soccer game. Notice how each child moves before. Basic pattern recognition, Director White dismissed. All species have it. No, sir, this is different, Gray insisted. They're not just recognizing patterns. They're experiencing multiple futures simultaneously. Watch this chess game recording. Both players respond to outcomes that never actually happen. Director White's color darkened, a sign of irritation in their species. Gray, you're imagining things. Submit your regular report on human social structures and leave these observations out of it. The call ended abruptly, leaving Gray frustrated. They looked back at their notes. Hundreds of examples, all showing the same impossible ability. Humans didn't just guess what might happen. They lived through countless possible futures in their minds, learning from experiences that never actually occurred. A sudden commotion drew their attention. A small accident was unfolding near the park entrance. A delivery truck had stopped short, but all the pedestrians had already moved to safety before the truck's brakes squealed. Each human had processed this future moment beforehand, moving to avoid danger before it existed. Gray added one final note. The pattern is clear. Humans don't just predict, they pre-live. Every human, at every moment, is experiencing thousands of possible futures. The implications are staggering. In any conflict, they would have already lived through every possible outcome before their opponent made their first move. They closed their notebook and stood up. Tomorrow, they would visit the human military base. If civilians showed this ability so clearly, What might they find among trained soldiers? The Galactic Council chamber buzzed with nervous energy. Dr. Gray sat in the observation gallery, their holographic disguise perfectly matching the other human observers. Below, representatives from 27 spacefaring species gathered for what should have been a routine diplomatic meeting. Ambassador Reeves stood alone at the human podium. Gray noticed how calm he looked compared to the other species representatives. The council was discussing new trade routes through contested space, a delicate topic that had caused wars in the past. The High Speaker, a tall crystalline being, rose to address the chamber. The council recognizes the Mist Collective's objection to Earth's proposed trade route. The Mist representative, a swirling cloud of purple vapor, moved forward. These humans wish to pass their ships through our sacred space. This is an insult that cannot. Ambassador Reed raised his hand slightly. Gray's sensors picked up something extraordinary. The human's brain activity had suddenly spiked. In the split second before he spoke, Reed's neural patterns showed he was processing thousands of possible conversations simultaneously. "Honored Representative," Reed said, his voice warm and respectful. "Before you continue, I wish to share something about Earth's deep space navigation protocols." Gray watched in fascination. Reed hadn't just interrupted. He had somehow known exactly what the Mist representative would say over the next 10 minutes and had chosen the perfect moment to change the conversation's direction. "Our ships," Reed continued, "are programmed to create beautiful light patterns during their journey. These patterns, when seen from your sacred space, would look remarkably similar to your own ancestral migration paths." The Mist representative's vapor form shifted to a lighter shade, a sign of surprise and interest. You know of our migration paths." "Of course," Reed smiled. "We studied them while designing our route. In fact, our ships could honor your ancient traditions by recreating these paths in light as they travel." Gray's tentacles curled in amazement. Reed had just turned a potential diplomatic crisis into a cultural exchange. But that wasn't what amazed them. Their instruments showed that Reed had processed and discarded 43 other possible approaches in the seconds before he spoke. He had lived through 43 different versions of this conversation in his mind, learning from each one before choosing this path. The Mist representative was now enthusiastically discussing light pattern designs with Reed. Other council members visibly relaxed. Crisis averted. But Gray couldn't relax. They had just witnessed something impossible. Their species, with all their advanced technology, needed complex computers to simulate even 2 or 3 possible outcomes. Reed had processed 43 full conversations in seconds, using nothing but his human mind. A movement caught Gray's attention. The High Chancellor, a massive insectoid being, was reaching for their ceremonial staff. By tradition, holding the staff while speaking meant declaring war. The Chancellor hadn't grabbed it yet, but Reed was already moving. "Chancellor," he said, turning away from the Mist representative at exactly the right moment. "I believe your ancestors also used light patterns for communication. We would be honored to incorporate some of your traditional signals as well." The Chancellor's claw stopped inches from the staff. Again, Gray's instruments showed the truth. Reed had lived through the next hour of possible futures and found the one path that avoided conflict. After the meeting, Gray watched Reed chat casually with various representatives. Each conversation flowed perfectly, as if rehearsed. But Gray knew better now. Reed wasn't rehearsing. He was experiencing every possible version of each conversation as it happened, learning from futures that would never exist. Later, in their private quarters, Gray added to their research notes. "Humans don't just use this ability unconsciously. Their diplomats have learned to harness it, processing countless possible futures to navigate complex situations. Today, I watched one human prevent 2 potential wars by experiencing and learning from futures that never happened. The implications for galactic diplomacy are troubling." Gray looked at their comm unit, wondering if they should report this to Director White. But something held them back. This knowledge felt dangerous. Perhaps some truths were better left unsaid. For now, Dr. Gray sat in their small office aboard the observation station, staring at the blank screen. This would be their 5th attempt to submit a report about humanity's unique ability. The previous 4 had mysteriously disappeared from the galactic communication network. "Computer, begin recording," Gray said, their tentacles twitching nervously. Official Report 947B. Analysis of Human Cognitive Abilities. They paused, choosing their words carefully. "In my 3 years studying humans, I have documented a previously unreported ability. Humans possess a natural talent for processing multiple future timelines simultaneously. This is not simple prediction or pattern recognition. They actually experience these potential futures in their minds." Gray attached video evidence from the council meeting. As shown in this footage, Ambassador Reed processed 43 different possible conversations in 2.3 seconds. He experienced each outcome and learned from futures that never happened. The computer beeped. Error. Unable to attach video file. File corrupted. Gray's outer membrane rippled in frustration. This had happened with every report. They tried again, this time with the playground footage. Computer. Attach observation file Park 147. Error. File not found. Gray checked their personal backup drive. The files were there, but something was preventing them from being included in official reports. They started typing again. Even without visual evidence, the pattern is clear. Every human, from children to diplomats, constantly processes thousands of possible futures. They learn from experiences that never happen. They adjust their actions based on outcomes they've lived through only in their minds. The screen flickered. Gray quickly saved their work, but when they reopened the file, half the text was missing. A message popped up on their screen. Report 947B flagged for review. Please stand by. Moments later, Director White's hologram appeared. "Gray, we need to discuss your recent observations." "Sir, the evidence is clear," Gray said, their voice firm despite their nervousness. "Humans don't just plan ahead. They live through every possibility. It's why they're impossible to outmaneuver. They've already experienced every move we could make." "These reports must stop," Director White said quietly. "Some knowledge is too dangerous." "But sir, the scientific community needs to know." "Think." "Gray," Director White interrupted. "What happens when other species learn that humans don't just outsmart them, but actually experience and learn from futures that never happen? What happens to galactic peace when everyone realizes humans enter every negotiation having already lived through every possible outcome?" Gray's third heart skipped a beat. They hadn't considered the panic this knowledge might cause. "Delete your reports," Gray, Director White ordered. "Continue your observation post, but focus on documented human abilities only." "That's an order." After Director White's hologram disappeared, Gray sat in silence. Their screen showed a new message. Report 947B deleted due to security concerns. They looked out their window at the busy city below. A human child was playing hopscotch, perfectly jumping through a complex pattern she had never tried before. She had already experienced every jump in her mind before her feet left the ground. A street vendor caught a falling cup before his customer dropped it. A driver smoothly avoided an accident that hadn't happened yet. A construction worker handed his colleague a tool that hadn't been asked for. Gray opened a new file, this time on their personal device. Private research log. Day 1247. I now understand why my reports keep disappearing. The truth about human abilities is too frightening to be officially acknowledged. They don't just plan. They live through every possibility. They learn from experiences they never had. They remember futures that never existed. They save the file under heavy encryption. Perhaps Director White is right. Some knowledge is too dangerous to share, but I must continue documenting this ability. Because if humans can do this unconsciously, what might they achieve if they learn to control it fully? Gray looked at their hidden camera feeds from the military base. Tomorrow, They would see exactly what humans could do when they actually tried to use this power. The military base buzzed with activity as Dr. Gray followed Captain Hart through the corridors. Their holographic disguise identified them as a visiting researcher, though Gray's 3 hearts beat faster with each step. They weren't supposed to be here. "We're running combat simulations today," Captain Hart explained, leading them into a large control room. Nothing classified, just standard training exercises. Gray's sensors were already recording everything. Screens covered the walls, showing different squad positions in a training field outside. But what caught Gray's attention was how the soldiers moved. "Beginning exercise Alpha," someone announced over the speakers. Gray watched in amazement. The soldiers didn't move like the civilians in the park. Their movements weren't just smooth, they were impossible. Each soldier shifted position before any threat appeared. They responded to attacks that hadn't happened yet. They moved together like a perfect dance, except the music hadn't started playing. "Computer, mark timestamp," Gray whispered to their hidden recorder. "Subjects displaying advanced timeline processing. They appear to be." An alarm suddenly blared through the base. Red lights flashed. "Real situation," Captain Hart announced, her voice calm. "Reactor leak in Section 7. All personnel, battle stations." Gray's instruments showed the captain's brain activity exploding into patterns they had never seen before. In the next 3 seconds, Captain Hart lived through over 500 possible futures. She experienced every possible decision and its consequences, all before speaking her next words. "Team 2, cut through the maintenance tunnel," she ordered. "You'll meet the leak at Junction 45. Team 1, take the south elevator shaft. The main corridor will be blocked by steam in 40 seconds. Gray watched in stunned silence. The captain hadn't just guessed these things. She had lived through every possible route, experienced every failure, learned from futures that would never happen, and chosen the perfect path. The teams moved exactly as ordered. When they reached Junction 45, the leak was exactly where Captain Hart had said it would be. When Team 1 reached the south elevator, steam filled the main corridor precisely 40 seconds later. "Reactor secured," a voice reported over the comm. "No casualties." "Good work, everyone," Captain Hart said, then turned to Gray. "Sorry about the interruption. These things happen." But Gray barely heard her. Their sensors had recorded everything. The captain's brain had processed more potential futures in 3 seconds than Gray's most advanced computers could simulate in a week. She hadn't just predicted the crisis. She had lived through hundreds of versions of it and chosen the one timeline where everything worked perfectly. "How?" Gray started, then caught themselves. "How often do you run drills for this kind of situation?" Captain Hart shrugged. "We don't, really. You just learn to see the best path forward." See the best path, such a simple way to describe something so impossible. Humans didn't just see paths, they lived them all simultaneously. Later, in their secure room, Gray reviewed the data. The soldiers' movements during training showed they had experienced every possible attack before any happened. Captain Hart's response to the crisis proved that humans could consciously control this ability when needed. "Computer, personal log update," Gray whispered. "Military observation confirms worst fears. Humans don't just unconsciously process future timelines. They can do it intentionally. A single human military officer can experience and learn from hundreds of possible futures in seconds." Gray's outer membrane shivered as they added, "In any conflict, humans would have an impossible advantage. Before their opponents make their first move, humans would have already lived through every possible version of the entire battle. They would know every strategy, every counter, every outcome. They would only need to choose which victory they prefer." Looking at the data again, Gray understood why the galaxy feared humans. It wasn't their weapons or technology. It was their minds, endless processors of infinite possibilities, constantly learning from futures that never were. And this was just what they could observe in a simple training exercise. What might humans be capable of if they fully understood their own power? Dr. Gray couldn't sleep. The data from the military base kept playing in their mind. As they paced their small apartment, a message flashed on their private terminal. Unknown sender. Meet at the old observatory. Midnight. Bring your research. Others have seen what you've seen. Gray's first instinct was to ignore it, but after 5 failed attempts to report their findings, curiosity won. They grabbed their encrypted data drive and left. The old observatory sat abandoned on a hill outside the city. As Gray approached, they noticed 3 different alien species waiting in the shadows. Each wore a holographic disguise, just like Gray's. "Welcome, observer," a tall figure said, deactivating their disguise to reveal a quantum mind from the Andromeda galaxy. "I am Research Director Blue." The others dropped their disguises too. A hive navigator, a star monk, all high-ranking scientists from advanced civilizations. "We've read your blocked reports," Blue said. "You're not the first to discover humanity's ability. We've been watching them for centuries." Gray's outer membrane rippled with surprise. Then why isn't this common knowledge? The star monk stepped forward, his crystalline form glowing softly. "Show them," he said to Blue. Blue activated a holographic display. It showed ancient battle footage from across the galaxy. Humans fighting various alien species, but something was wrong with the numbers. In each of these conflicts, Blue explained, humans were outnumbered at least 50 to 1. Their technology was inferior. They had no strategic advantage. Yet they won. Every time. Because they experienced every possible battle before it happened, Gray whispered. "Exactly." The hive navigator chittered. "My species once ran a simulation. We created our most advanced battle computer. It could process 1 million possible combat scenarios per second." "And," Gray asked, "a single human commander could process more scenarios, more deeply, and learn from them more effectively. Our best technology couldn't match what humans do naturally." Blue switched the hologram to show various alien defense systems. Every species has tried to develop countermeasures. Time shields, probability scramblers, future sight blockers. None work. How can you defend against an enemy who has already lived through every possible version of the battle? The star monk asked quietly. "Who has experienced every strategy you might try and already knows how to counter it?" Gray's research suddenly made terrible sense. That's why my reports kept disappearing. If everyone knew. Panic. Blue finished. The galaxy would panic. Some species would attack Earth immediately, trying to eliminate the threat. Others would surrender instantly. Either way, chaos. "We've managed to keep this secret for 300 years, the Hive Navigator said. "A consensus among all major galactic powers. We never speak of this ability. Never acknowledge it. Never try to counter it. It's safer this way," Blue added. "Humans don't fully understand what they can do. They think everyone processes futures like they do. As long as they don't realize how unique they are." A noise made them all freeze. Blue quickly checked his sensors. "Security patrol. We need to leave." Before departing, Blue handed Gray a small device. "All our combined research on human timeline processing. Add your observations. Help us understand them better. But never, never let this become public knowledge." Back in their apartment, Gray studied the device. It contained thousands of reports spanning centuries. Every major species had noticed this human ability. Every civilization had tried to defend against it. All had failed. "Computer, final research note," Gray whispered. "The conspiracy makes sense now. The galaxy's greatest powers haven't kept this secret out of fear alone. They've done it out of necessity. Because if humans ever fully understood their power, if they realized that no other species could process infinite futures like they do." Gray looked out at the peaceful city. Humans going about their lives, constantly experiencing and learning from thousands of futures that would never live. Each of them carrying, unknowingly, the most terrifying power in the galaxy. Some truths, Gray concluded, are too dangerous to be known, even by those who wield them. 2 weeks after the secret meeting at the observatory, Dr. Gray sat in their apartment, surrounded by holographic displays. They had spent days studying the combined research from every major galactic civilization, and what they found had changed everything. The displays showed thousands of human achievements. A doctor who saved an entire hospital during a disaster by somehow being in exactly the right place at every crucial moment. A rescue team that found survivors in impossible locations because they just had a feeling. A small group of settlers who survived on a hostile planet by guessing the safe paths through danger. None of these humans knew their true power. They all thought they were just lucky or intuitive or good at their jobs. A message flashed on Gray's screen. Director White wanted an immediate meeting. Gray accepted the call, and their superior's hologram appeared. "You've accessed classified files," Director White said. "Files you shouldn't even know about." "Sir," Gray replied, their voice steady. "I've discovered something. Something important. More dangerous observations about humans." Director White's tone was warning. "No, sir. Something we've all missed." Gray activated a presentation. "Look at these patterns. Every documented case of humans using their future processing ability. There's a clear trend." The holographic display showed hundreds of incidents: hospital emergencies, natural disasters, space accidents, crisis after crisis, all solved by humans who just knew what to do. "We've been so afraid of their power," Gray continued, "that we missed its true nature. Humans don't use this ability to dominate. They use it to save lives, to solve problems, to help others." Director White's color shifted slightly. "Explain." "In 300 years of secret observations, no human has ever used this power for conquest. They process infinite futures not to find paths to victory, but to find paths to survival. Not just for themselves, but for everyone." Gray showed more data. Even their military uses it primarily for defense and rescue. Captain Hart didn't just find the fastest way to fix the reactor. She found the way where nobody got hurt. "But their potential for warfare," Director White started, "is exactly that. Potential," Gray interrupted. "But their actual pattern of use, it's always been about protection, preservation, progress." Gray displayed their final analysis. "Sir, we've been asking the wrong question. We kept asking, how do we defend against this power? When we should have asked, how do we work with it?" The display showed new simulations, scenarios where humans' ability to process multiple futures was combined with other species' unique strengths. Problems that had stumped the galaxy's greatest minds for centuries, solved by humans experiencing every possible solution until they found the right one. "Imagine," Gray said softly, "what we could achieve if we stopped fearing this power and started understanding it. Humans don't even know they're doing something unique. They think everyone experiences possibilities like they do. They've never tried to weaponize it because to them, it's just normal." Director White was silent for a long moment. "You want to tell them?" "No," Gray replied. "Not yet, but I want to change how we study them. Instead of watching them like a threat, we should learn from them. Understand how they naturally use this ability to help others." Gray looked out their window at the city below. A child was helping an elderly person cross the street, moving perfectly to support them before they stumbled. A firefighter was rushing into a building, somehow knowing exactly where to find someone who needed help. "They're not our enemy," Gray concluded. "They're not even our competitors. They're problem solvers who experience every possible future until they find one where things work out better for everyone. That's not a threat to the galaxy. It's a gift." Director White's hologram flickered as they considered this. "Submit your full analysis. The Council will need to discuss this new perspective." After the call ended, Gray began writing their final report. Not about humanity's fearsome ability, but about humanity's greatest gift: the power to experience infinite futures and consistently choose the ones that help others. Some truths weren't too dangerous to be known. They were just waiting to be understood in the right way.